Professor Ziauddin Sardar. I am Anas Hayyan, a final year political science student from Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, Kulliyah of Islamic Rabbit Knowledge and Human Sciences, and I will be your moderator for tonight's event. Professors, doctors, brothers and sisters, to bless our event this evening, let us recite Ummul Kitab Al-Fatiha. Tonight, we will be listening to the lecture by Professor Ziauddin Sardar, the Director of the Center for Post-Normal Policy and Future Studies on Student Movement in Post-Normal Times. But before we begin, I would like to gracefully invite Honorable Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Director of the International Islamic University Malaysia, to deliver the welcoming remarks. Please welcome Tan Sri.
Thank you, brother. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i mursalin sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. La haula wala quwwata illa billah. Brother Professor Ziauddin Sardar, Director of the Center for Post-Normal Policy and Future Studies, Dr. Zul Hassan, guests, students, brothers and sisters, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Grateful to Allah SWT for giving us this opportunity to meet, and I'm indeed personally very grateful to meet Brother Ziauddin again after a long time. And this time, I think, for an occasion which is very special to my heart, and it's about Student Union. You know that I've been always talking about student activities, Student Union, and what students should be doing. So I think you will be listening from a person who have got tremendous experience in this. And not only that, I think you are able to mesh it with what is going to come. In other words, the post-normal sort of situation. Yeah, most of us are student leaders and student union sort of activists in a normal quote-unquote situation, and therefore the game must have changed when you talk about post-normal and how do you actually adjust to it for the purposes of bringing Islam right to the center and making it a thriving sort of a way of life as far as moving forward is concerned. So on that note, I want to welcome Professor Ziauddin Sardar and also the guests. And we also learned that there are many things that they are doing. One is about the atlas, the post-normal atlas, which I'm very excited to explore tonight after I've gone home and see how else we can make this better as we move along. So your role here, I want to reiterate, is basically not just to listen, but to assimilate what has been said and how you can convert it to something that is useful to us in the terms of making it happening. You know, it's just not good enough knowing about it and nothing happens. Everything else is the same around us, despite the many information or the many knowledge, or even the wisdom that is added onto it. I think foremost for us is how do you change things around us? We all accepted that we are not in a good state, but how do you make it a good state? I think if we can do that in a very minuscule state, I think it's okay. Then we can grow it as we go along. And as I look at this atlas that was shown to me, it starts, I'm sure, from a very small sort of thing, but then it grows. If there's nothing there to start off with, then it will never grow. And this university believes that now we need to work with the community, and this community engagement is about us experiencing and growing at the same time. Yeah. So I am indeed very, very happy, and I hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless this gathering and make this gathering a kind of a turning point for us. Prof, we are going to have our 40th anniversary in 2 years' time. I hope by the time we are 40 years old, we are matured, and we can make another big contribution as much as we have made the last 40 years and the next 40 years, what else that you can do? And the thinking must start now. You cannot wait, because by the time you arrive at that place, it will be overtaken by event you have not ready. So on that note, I welcome you again and thank you very much for your time. And thank you very much for being here. Hopefully, our gathering will be blessed, inshallah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
So this is the
Thank you very much, Honorable Tan Sri, for delivering the welcoming remark. Before we get started, I would like to share with everyone the biography of our speaker this evening. It's a long biography, but I had to cut it short. Prof, I'm sorry. Professor Ziauddin Sardar was born in Pakistan in 1951 and grew up in Hackney, East London. He is the director of the Center for Postnormal Policy and Future Studies. He is also a futurist, writer, broadcaster, and cultural critic. He is a former professor of law and society at Middlesex University and professor of post-colonial studies at the City University, London. The Independent newspaper has described Prof. Ziauddin as a Britain's own Muslim polymath, and he is also considered as one of the top 100 public intellectuals in Britain. He has published over 50 books, and he works across a number of disciplines ranging from Islamic studies, future studies, post-normal policies, science policy, literary criticisms, information science to culture relations, art criticisms, and critical theory. How are you, Prof? Welcome to IUM. We are very delighted to have you tonight. Professors, doctor, brothers, and sisters, our topic of interest today is student movement in post-normal times. A reminder to everyone that we will be listening to the lecture by Prof. Ziauddin until around 9:30 p.m. and we will be having a question and answer session by the end of the lecture, inshallah. Prof. Ziauddin Sardar had defined post-normal times as the in-between periods where all orthodoxies are dying, new ones have not yet emerged, and very few things seems to make sense. Hence, it is a transitionary period characterized by the 3 C's, which are complexity, chaos, and contradictions. These forces propel and sustain post-normal times, leading to uncertainty and different types of ignorance that makes decision-making problematic and increase risk to individual, society, and the planet. And how would the student movement work and play its role in post-normal times where complexity, chaos, and contradiction takes place? Without wasting any time, I would like to respectfully invite Professor Ziauddin Sardar to deliver his lecture. Please welcome, Prof.
I begin once again. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Sorry for jumping. Since this is an intellectual discourse, what I like to do is to speak very little and have students engage and ask questions. And the intellectual discourse is a very specific term with a well-established history in Malaysia. So in the 80s, when I first started coming to Malaysia, we started the intellectual discourses where we invited students and lecturers and had a kind of a conversation and critical engagement on a particular topic. So this is a kind of continuation of that. And I see some people here may be actually product of the intellectual discourses that we started in the 80s. Right. So we hope to continue. So what I'm going to do is just briefly talk about the students and student movements, and then briefly about post-normal times. And then what I would like to do is for people to really ask questions. The more difficult the questions, the better. So I want to give more time to question and answer than to speaking. Okay, the couple of things to be said about student movements, or a couple of things to be said about students. One of the first things that we need to say about students, that students are the future. They are the future of the country. They are the captains of industry of the future. They are the entrepreneurs of the future. They are fathers and mothers of the future, right? The future belongs to them to a very large extent. And that's something that student movements need to grasp and perceive in a sense. So they need to constantly think about the future and how the future is changing. Right? That's the first point. The second point is students are the agents of change. Right? Students have always been involved in changing societies. Right? The 1968 protests in France, right? The environmental movement started by students, in California. Many of the kind of major developments in contemporary times, things like the Wall Street movement, right? All of these, behind all of these have been students, right? And in contemporary times, the students, agents of change, are becoming younger and younger. So who's the student that we all now know throughout the globe? What's her name? Greta Thunberg. A young student who just started a demonstration outside the Swedish parliament against climate change. And now, of course, she's an internationally recognized figure, right, who can kind of really kind of has been an agent of change. I mean, she really has mobilized people and raised their consciousness and started. Or you look something like Malala Yousafzai, right? A student going to school, and the Talibans, of course, don't like women to go to school. So she was shot. She brought in to London, where she recovered. But she was even more determined for education. She became a kind of a spokesperson for education for women. Right? She won the Nobel Peace Prize. She spoke to the United Nations and so on and so forth. So young people, young students are and have always been agents of change. So you are going to introduce the change that is going to come about. Right? You are the future, and you are also the agent of the kind of future that will emerge in the next 10, 15 years. Right? So I think these are the 2 points. Now, let me move to the post-normal times. It's not just that you're going to introduce new changes, but the fact is that the world is changing itself. Right? Change, as they used to say, is the only constant. But here is a particular point. Change is not the only constant. In fact, change is not constant at all, because change itself is changing. The nature of change itself is changing, right? Now, that is a major awareness that you have to say. It's not just that things will change. So, for example, you study one particular subject, you think that, things will change. When I get my degree, PhD, I'm going to get a job, say the discipline happens to be X, right? But things are changing so rapidly that by the time you finish your graduation and you've actually got a job, or you are in the market for the job, that discipline X doesn't really exist anymore. Right? That's what I mean. The nature of change itself is changing. Right? So you need to keep an eye on what's happening. And now change is accelerating. Right? There are 4 things we need to understand about change. 1, it is accelerating. Right? 2, it's global in nature. Right? 3, it has impact at the most local level, up down to individual. And 4, things often happen simultaneously. So we call them the 4 S's. The four S's of post-normal change. That 1, change is speed. Things happen very, very fast. So this puts an incredible burden on the contemporary students. My generation did not have that burden. Things change very, very slowly, often for the bad, right? As we see, right? So my generation, Tansiri's generation, right, had it easy, if you like. Right? Things were not changing so rapidly. And they were not global in nature. Globalization, as we know it, I mean, contemporary globalization is only like 30, 40 years old. Things were not global. And also, global change seldom had an impact on a local situation. Now, of course, it has a direct impact on local situation. What happens in London today will have an impact on Kuala Lumpur tomorrow morning, right? And things happen simultaneously. That's the other thing, right? Things happen simultaneously. So to give you an example, that we are in a middle of a pandemic, that's not unusual. There have been pandemics in the past, right? This particular pandemic was predicted by many people, including myself, about 10 years ago. It's not unusual, right? Pandemic. But the nature of pandemic has changed. Never in the history of pandemic, a virus brought the whole world to a standstill. That's never happened, right? Shopping mall closed, no travel, no Hajj, no Umrah. In London, couldn't even go to the mosques. Those who did, they died. I mean, that's the truth, because they were not just violating the protocol, but they actually were spreading the virus. Right? No tourism, no economics, no business. Right? Has a major impact. So that sort of change we have never seen before. A kind of epidemic that has so many side effects, which are actually, each one of them is a major effect in itself, right? So you're going to have that kind of change that you have to But so as a result of the 4 S's, the speed, scope, scale, and simultaneity, we have a world which is very, very complex. So you now find yourselves in a complex world, which may be even more complex when you graduate or when you go out into the world. So you have to understand what complexity is all about and how do you navigate complexity. And one way, of course, to see a complex situation is to look at contradictions. The more complex the situation will be, the more contradictions will be in that particular system. I don't have to go very far. Look at the Malaysian politics. Look at the contradiction and look at how complex it has become from 4 or 5 years ago, certainly from 10 years ago, right? And you can appreciate that. The other thing is, of course, complexity can generate positive feedback, which can lead to chaos. And we have seen the chaos, happening in the world throughout. So that's the other thing. You need to appreciate all that. So the kind of inheritance that we have given, my generation has given your generation, involves complexity, involves climate change, right? It involves kind of chaotic behavior and accelerating change. So your responsibilities are much greater than ever as students, as student movements, as agents of change. Right. And therefore, you have to be much more aware of what is going around you, what's happening in the world. You have to study what the trends are happening. You have to be aware of, what could possibly kind of emerge in the next 2 or 3 years, how things will change. The last point I want to make is this. Conventionally, things change, and things have always changed, and now they're changing at an accelerated pace. But our duty, I think, particularly as Muslims, is not just to sit back and say things change. Our duty is to change things. Right? And so the students of today have to be aware of the fact that they are going to go out and change things. As agents of change, they have to change things. And they have to change things according to what is their own desires and needs and requirements and aspirations. Yeah. For this, you got to have a vision of some kind. You can't just change things in vacuum without or go in any direction. You need some sort of vision. So you need to nurse and nourish some sort of vision of the kind of society you want to live in yourself before you go out to change things. And nowadays, of course, you have lots of tools to change things. And I don't just mean social media. I mean resources like the professor himself. All the senior lecturers and professors here, they are resources. They are tools that you can use their experience in a sense. The difference, I think, between the kind of students and the next generation is maybe what Al-Ghazali will call wisdom, right? That in a sense, the elderly generation have experience, they have knowledge, they have awareness, they have lots of, things that make them wise. And the younger ones haven't acquired the knowledge, they haven't acquired the experience, right? I think Al-Ghazali was partly wrong, because the young can have just as much wisdom as the old, right? And Al-Ghazali's definition of wisdom includes one thing that I think not many people have noticed, and this is you find in the Book of Knowledge, right? He says wisdom, one category of wisdom is shrewdness. Right? By shrewdness, what he means is a clever awareness of what is going around you, so you can adjust to change. That's what he means by shrewdness. So in a sense, the students have to have the ability to adjust to change. So they don't just have to go out and change things, but they have to have ability to adjust to change, and they have to have wisdom. Right? And part of that wisdom you can acquire from your seniors. Part of that wisdom you have to develop for yourself, and you have to be shrewd in the kind of world we are living in. And what we call this this kind of wisdom, if you like. We normally in the post-normal times jargon call it navigation. How do we navigate ourselves with wisdom and knowledge to a better place? And we got to have a vision of that better place that we are going to. So you have to think of what kind of societies do you want. Do you want to live in a society that has pollution? Do you want to live in a society that's, demolishing rainforests and causing, climate chaos? Do you want to live in a society that's totally corrupt? What kind of governance do you want? Do you want accountability in the governance? What kind of subjects do you want to study at the university? I mean, one of the things that one examples we give, and when I talk about post-normal times, and forgive me if I'm repeating myself for those who have attended the post-normal times workshop, is the students at University of Manchester, who about four years ago came out. The first undergraduate students came out and said, we do not want to study economics the way it is being taught. This economics is not promoting equality, right? And at the same time, the book by Piketty had come out, Capitalism in the 20th Century, which showed that systematically, the contemporary economic theories have actually enhanced inequality, right, throughout the last 200 years. Very powerful study. So they came out in protest that we are not going to study the subject. And then they were joined by postgraduates, and eventually even some lecturers joined them. And there was negotiation between the students and the university authorities, which lasted quite a few days. And finally, the settlement was that the university said to the students, you write down your grievances about economics, and we will publish them in the University of Manchester Press. So they wrote a book called Rethinking Economics, and University of Manchester Press published the book. And it became so popular that it was in Penguin. Penguin brought out as a Penguin paperback. And then people started teaching. I mean, it's only 4 or 5 years. So notice how quickly the changes. People started teaching it, and now it is in Routledge text. It's a Routledge textbook, right? So you see how, in fact, how the demonstration, how the protest turned into something positive, right? In a sense, the other day when I was talking about it, I was saying that the young people have right to be angry, because the kind of world they inherit is in a total mess. But the anger has to be directed towards constructive. We are builders. We need to build, in a sense, and building requires much harder work. Destroying is easy, but to build things is much difficult. And that's part of, if you like, of changing things. We change things by building on ideas, by building on cohesion in society, solidarity, by building on disciplines, by taking them forward in new directions. So I think that's about what I want to say. I will like to kind of engage and answer some questions. And what I really want to end with is that you should be kind of burning with the desire to create a new world, a better world. That's what students' movements ought to be about today. Not satisfied with what the condition of society is at the moment, but you want to change it, and you want to do practical things to change it. And those practical things can be very, very small and very, very big. And sometimes very, very small things become very, very big. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ziauddin, for the words of wisdom. I am sure all of our audiences were enlightened in terms of how students could be the agent of change in an accelerating world, in a world that global in nature, that the scope is that everything that is happening in any part of the world could affect even the local or the individuals in another part of the world, as well as the simultaneous effect of any kind of changes that are happening in the world. I think I truly agree in terms of the students being the agent of change, when Professor have mentioned many times in terms of students ought to create their desirable future and at the same time by seeking wisdoms from those that are probably from the older generations, while having the greed or having the desire to ensure that their future are determine the future that are desirable. I think everyone have a lot of questions that you may ask to Professor Ziauddin. I think we still have a long time we still have a long time, and I am sure that we can open up a lot of questions to Professor Ziauddin. If any of you would like to ask any questions, just raise your hand and go to the nearest microphone, and you may pose your questions to Professor Ziauddin Sardar. Okay, Brother Rafiq.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you. My name is Muhammad Rafi Shami, third year economic student from Kuliah of Economic and Management Sciences. Thank you, Prof, for your speech just now and your lecture. My question is, I want to know if there are some way that we can anticipate the changes that are happening around us. Is there any factors or knowledge or tools that we can use? Or maybe we can look towards the changes that are localized instead of globalized, so we can manage these changes for our own. That will be my question. Thank you.
Yes, well, I think one of the first things you need to do is to be futures literate, which what UNESCO calls futures literacy, the awareness of how to anticipate, how to explore trends and spot emerging issues. We actually do workshops just to make people basic futures literacy, right? In a kind of the basic methods of future studies, so that you can kind of use the tools yourself. So there are lots of tools. There's one particular tool that we've made ourselves, and it's called Atlas of Muslim Futures. Can we kind of show them on the screen somewhere? Can you project that? Is it possible to?
Just the website.
Scott can do it. Yeah. Yeah. But if you are not interested in kind of digital stuff, then there's a book called The Futures of Muslim Societies, trends and trends, emerging issues and scenarios, which is worth looking at in a sense. And one of the kind of best way to do this is just to be aware of what is going around in terms of news, in terms of reports, in terms of kind of scientific research or whatever, just to keeping an eye on the new things that are coming in your society. So there may be local research that is going on. You need to pay attention to. There is maybe a news story, right, which triggers something in your mind that this may turn into a new. Yeah. So this, yeah. So okay, so Scott will now demonstrate that. If you enter the map. Okay, so this is just the first map, which is called What Just Happened. So this actually tracks in real time what's happening around the Muslim world, but what's happening around the world according to certain subjects, right? So, for example, this is families in Syria struggling amid a severe food crisis, right? So if you press on various of these little text things, that you get the story as it happening. You can Syrian refugees free Lebanon camp. So we're looking at Lebanon, so you're going to get that kind of stories. But you can do that if you go to the menu, Scott. If you go to the menu, so you can do that in terms of what just happened, but also their future challenges. If you go to future challenges. Go to future challenges, just press future challenges, and yeah, so these are future challenges. No future challenges for Iceland, but there are many for Europe. Just click on any old thing. Oh, there's 80. Yeah. Okay, so London. Okay, AI to detect and prevent financial fraud. So they just developed an AI. So this will have, some consequences. You can kind of look at various how bacteria can recover precious metal from. So these are kind of developments, the future opportunities as well as challenges, if you like. And then you have higher education and knowledge and Islamic and social economy, right? So according to these 4 fields, you can find out what's going on in terms of emerging issue and some of them in your areas as well. And there are dominant trends. If you go to dominant trends at the top, so there's dominant trends here. So cities, you can look at cities, what's happening to cities. Go down, Scott, go down, yeah. In terms of food, the 3 dominant trends, Islamophobia, robots, energy, water. We're going to have 60 dominant trends. So we only put about 1 or 2 every month because they take a lot of time. So just go into cities, for example. Let's have a look at cities. Right. So if you look at it, it takes you through the cities general, what the cities are all about. Most of the maps and things are interactive. You can interact with the maps. There we go. You can see the maps. You can play with the maps. How the cities have grown. In terms of population, how rural and urban population has changed. You can go down and. According to income and various things. So, I mean, all these dominant trends have dynamic features that you can play with and learn about. So, we are hoping that this will become a tool that young Muslims, students can use to find out what is going on in their own region or in their own cities or in their own kind of locality, if you like, in a sense, but it will require a lot more data. We are putting in data on kind of every 2-3 weeks. So it ends with Kuala Lumpur. I don't know why this. Yeah, this shot. So why does it end with Kuala Lumpur? Yeah, Jody did that. I think it's Jody's special joke at the end. Sometimes he puts these little things in. Yeah. So we just start. It's about a year old since it went live, right? And it's already grown and will grow. And we're hoping that people like you will be able to input things on it. If you spot something that is going on in your region, you'll be able to put. You'll be able to send data saying this is happening in my area. Maybe it's happening in other areas as well. Then we can collaborate and say, this is a major event, a major emerging issue that we need to focus on.
Prof. Zia,
Yeah.
Tribati also, I think Scott, you can show the Muslim society's post-normal time. The student can download free.
Yeah. If you go to
normal time, go to
just go to No. PNT website. Go to PNT post night. No, that's us. Go to PNT. There. Yeah, that's all right. Okay, so this is the Post-Normal Times website, where you will find a lot of material that will help you understand what is changing and how things are changing and about the whole Post-Normal Times. And on the resources page, there it is, resources. You find resources on future studies. If you go to future studies, there we are. So you can have some of these books. You can just download these books. Some of my old kind of future stuff going back decades. The last book we are translating. Yeah, the last book is available in Malay now. Go down. Where's the? Oh, by the way, this is very interesting. The timeline is very interesting for you to explore. So when people ask what is post-normal times and how does it differ with, say, classic time or modern periods or postmodern periods, so this gives you an indication. Yeah, and you now go to truth, just give them a little taste of the truth. So classic, no, hang on. Classic is defined by Plato. Of course, truth is absolute. And also in monolithic time, postmodern, relative, and in post-normal, contradictory. All right. So you can have various, say you can look at nature.
How's marriage?
Marriage, yeah, there's marriage. Classic, go back to classic marriage. Yeah, pandemics, okay, look, pandemics, go to classic, Spanish flu, HIV/AIDS, postmodern Zika virus, SARS, COVID-19. Yeah. So this is a timeline to kind of play, but we are basically interested in resources. So if you go down to the other resources pages, you'll find lots of papers we have written. Go to post-normal times theory. Okay, so there's the post-normal times reader that you can download. Volume 2 we are preparing now. This is volume 1 with about 300 pages, and this is the book that Professor Fawzan was talking about, Muslim Societies in Post-Normal Times, that I mentioned earlier on, that has kind of, all the things, and then lots of videos and postcards, podcasts, and also research papers in referee journals. So we have a whole list of research papers published in referee journal that you can get hold of. So this is my paper on transnormal, and you can download all this. So the huge amount of resources there if you're really interested in. Sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, the smoke of ignorance. Yeah, click on that. I was talking about earlier on. So there we are. This is published in Futures, which is a primary journal in Futures field. Yeah. Anyway, you can download the paper and see how knowledge production itself. This paper discusses how knowledge, big data and AI are changing knowledge production, and what does it mean for us from the point of view of Islam and from the point of view of wisdom that we were talking about earlier on. So to answer your question, I think we've given a pretty extensive answer now. I hope you're satisfied. Yeah, if you are satisfied, raise your hand so we know.
Satisfied.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof, for the questions. Do we have other questions? Okay, brother at the back.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum, Professor. My name is Sidki. I'm a third-year student from Usuluddin and Comparative Religion. So, if I may, I would like to ask 3 questions. First of all, because we construct our ideas on how to give change based on what is happening around us, right? But every day there is something new happening, and in a very fast pace. And with knowing that there is always incommensurability in our ideas, because our ideas are based on induction of the actual problem that we construct the ideas, but tomorrow there will be another problem relating with the same issue. So how can we know, how can we actually establish an idea that could sustain to answer the problem and the problem incoming? That's the first question. And then how, with the very fast change that we are having right now, how is it possible for us to have a interdisciplinary perspective on issues? Because for not saying for political science, there are so many incommensurability happening and for so many changes, and knowing that in your theory, with your CCC, that everything is connected. So when there is a, say, political issue happening, it must be sometimes related with social issues, with gender issues, and so on and so forth. So with so many changes in every discipline, how can we I believe it is very hard to comprehend the whole change in one discipline alone, let alone the whole interdisciplinary approach. So how can we manage that? And the third question, because like for what we are happening right now, that the local changes that are happening, like TikTok trends in the village and everything, are also related with the change that are happening in the big cities. How do we actually manage to be able to give proper policies for a specific level of area? Should every policy take account for every level of occurrence? So thank you.
Can you repeat the last question? I didn't quite get the last question.
Yeah, because like for example, there are levels of society of traditional societies in villages and the modern.
Yeah. How do you? Okay. First of all, I think we need to appreciate that very few things are going to be sustainable. What is sustainable are the virtues that we cherish. They're not going anywhere, right? And in fact, the first paper I wrote on called Welcome to Post-Normal Times, it actually concluded by saying the only way to navigate post-normal times is to enhance the virtues. I didn't call it religious virtues, but I regard them as religious virtues, right? The virtues of Islam, virtues of patience, compassion, mercy, persistence, right? Etc. The classical virtues that the Quran teaches us, that most religions in fact teach us. So these are the virtues that are going to remain sustainable. Apart from that, we need to make sure that the globe itself remains sustainable, because we now know that sustainability of the planet is in question, right? So that becomes a major issue. How do we make the planet sustainable? From climate change, from not exceeding planetary boundaries. There are 7 planetary boundaries, 4 of which we have exceeded. So our oceans are more polluted than ever. Our rivers are more polluted than ever. There's, the ice is melting in the Arctic and the Antarctic Circle and so on and so forth. So in a sense, unless we are aware of these issues, we won't do anything about them. And unless we do something about these issues, we are not going to be very sustainable in any way, right? So I think we need to start thinking about them seriously, and about what can we do here and now in our little locality, in our small way, to actually become much more sustainable. So I think that's the second is the question of interdisciplinary is very, very important. Most problems we face nowadays are complex problems. And we know that complex problems require complex approaches. It is called the law of requisite variety, right? If you have a complex interconnected problem with dynamic variables that's changing all the time, you need a complex approach to appreciate it, right? In a sense. Therefore, individual disciplines will not be able to solve the problems that are going to emerge in the future. In fact, they are unable to solve the problems that are emerging now, let alone in the future. So transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary perspectives then become essential, right? So therefore, as students, to make sure that your discipline does not become irrelevant by the time you graduate, you have to make sure the university promotes interdisciplinary inquiry and integrated studies and multidisciplinary perspectives. It is essential for your survival, in a sense. And one of the criticism of the students who were studying economics at Manchester University was that the economics we are taught seems to be divorced from society. It's always about profit. It's always about competition. It's not about cooperation. It's not about compassion, right? There are other things in the world than simply profit in that sense. So this is a very important question. Interdisciplinary approaches are very, 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 very. I mean, if you only know Usuluddin, for example, well, you'll be very good at that, but you're not going to make much difference in the world apart from in that religious affair, right? So you do need to know something about other disciplines as well, which is very, very important. And of course, one approach to complexity is tackling it with diversity. So your multi-layers are very, very important. So any particular problem which is very complex, you need to bring different people. You need to bring people from traditional societies. You need to people with modern outlook, with conservative outlook, with liberal chemists, philosophers, right, physicists, really, theologians, etc., to look at a particular problem. In post-normal times theory, we call it polylogue, that you have to bring in different perspectives, as many different perspectives on a particular problem. And you need to appreciate the perspectives. You can't say that because this person comes from a rural village in a little kampong, he's stupid. That won't do. It is possible that that little person from a kampong is more profound in certain respects than you from modern urban Kuala Lumpur, right? You need to appreciate and respect his perspective, give him dignity. Only then can you understand the complex problem you face. So the old-fashioned virtues of respect and dignity become very, very important, right? We are taught to respect our elders. But we also need to teach our elders to recognize the talent of the young. This equation is often missing. Sometimes the older generation does not recognize how different the young are from themselves. Every father wants his children to become like him. And every child rebels against their parents and do not want to be like them, right? This is a universal story, okay? I've experienced it in my own with my own children, okay? They're all different. None of them want to become a writer like me, right? They're all different, right? Okay. So the elder generation, we need to appreciate the talent and the creativity that the young have, and we need to kind of give them enough freedom to unleash their talent, in a sense. But the younger also need to respect the elders and recognize the experience they have, and sometimes that the elders do speak with wisdom, which the young may not have. So yes. We need interdisciplinary and multiple perspectives from all sides. That's the way to navigate post-normal time.
Thank you very much, Prof. He would like to ask a follow-up question. Would that be okay?
Thank
Then
you,
I will go back
Professor.
to the brother
I
after
think
this.
that's a very, very important and necessary answer for all of us. And perhaps I would like to have a follow-up question regarding the first. I do share with you that indeed our virtue is timeless and will always be actual to answer the currently and the future problems. But for our society, Muslim society, our issue, maybe not issue, but challenge, our challenges is always how for us to articulate our virtues, our Islamic values in the actual temporal and spatial world. Like for example, in Indonesia, the case for Pancasila, there was a debate between the Islamists and the non-Islamists in Indonesia, so that we at the time come up with Darul Ahdi of Pancasila. But today now we are having so much incommensurability of whether Pancasila is actually sufficient enough to answer the challenges of our Indonesian challenges. So that, like I mentioned, that the factual occurrence that always happening in the future is keep challenging the actual idea that we, as Muslims, articulate in our temporal and spatial times. So how do we actually manage with that for the first question? And the second follow-up question is that for our it's not like I challenging Pancasila or something so far, but I not in a political manner. Yeah, and for the second question, like as how we see today, there are so many labels like gender studies, post-colonial studies, and like post-normal studies and everything. And I believe that's our current attempt in how to approach a thematic issue in interdisciplinary approach. But And I see this as very important approach. But do you think with our current university having department based on Department of Sciences like political sciences, sociological sciences, and everything and so forth, will it still be actual, or should we like convert all of the department of the university to like a thematical studies, or how shall we manage with this? But please keep Usuluddin. Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good question. I think the universities will be forced to do that anyway. Universities will be forced to do that. There is not a single lecturer professor I know who wants his students to be unemployed when they finish, or who doesn't want his student to use the knowledge they have gained at the university when in real life when they right. So they will see that. They will see that, and many universities are kind of moving towards multidisciplinary already in a sense. Now, the question about how do we translate our virtues into real life, in a sense, and about you mentioned about Islamic virtues. I think it is important not to see Islam as a closed system, right? It is also important not to see Islam simply as a faith, right? I think it's important that we see Islam as a worldview, right? And why, in fact, throughout my intellectual life and many of the books I've written, I've always emphasized that Islam is an open system. It's not like Jamaat Islami or Muslim Brotherhood will tell you it's a total system. Any total system becomes totalitarian very quickly, right? It's not a total system, it's an open system. It's a system of permissible structures, right? In a sense, there are certain things which are permissible in Islam and certain things which are not, right? And the things which are permissible are, you just do those. Things which are not permissible are few and far between, right? And most of the things are permissible. So you go towards the permissible and look at Islam as a worldview, yeah, which in a sense encourages you to engage with the world and change it. It's not a passive system that I'm a Muslim. Yeah, I'm a Muslim because I was born a Muslim and my father and mother is Muslim, and they beat the shit out of me to read the Quran, right? Which is what happens. I'm a Muslim because I'm a conscious individual. I've thought about it, and I know that part of my duty is to promote all that is good. That's the definition of dawah. Promote all that is good. How do I promote all that is good if I'm not good myself? So the first thing I need to do is to become good, however you define good, right? Then I promote all that is good in the world, all that is good in knowledge, all that is good in social behavior. And it's very easy to determine in some cases, but not in all cases, because good itself may change, right? So the example I give is about a good lake, right? And the reason I give the example for good lake is because Sharia is a way to watering hole, right? And watering hole, let us consider the watering hole is a lake. And people come and drink water from there, and the animals come and drink water from there, and everything's fine. Come back 100 years later, that good lake is not good anymore because it's been polluted, right? You go and drink water from there, you will die. The animals who've been drinking water from there, their carcasses can be seen because nothing was done, right? Things changed around but nobody looked after the changes within the lake. So sometimes good can become bad. So you need to be aware of that there's a dynamic involved here in that sense. I hope I answered some of your questions, but if you want to answer all the other questions, then I think there has to be a university course of 4 years for that.
Thank you very much.
Last question.
Sure.
What is the university doing? I think you must be here for 3 years now. How long have you been here?
3 years and 1 year self-pad.
Okay. So we're just about the same. I've been here for 3 years and you have been here for 3 years now. When I came, what I saw was basically everything in silos. Your kuliah exists on its own. And within the kuliah, there also exists another pockets of what we did in the 2 years was trying to break the silos. And we introduced this idea of flagship. Flagship is nothing magical, but to get people to work together. In other words, a kuliah alone, just like Prof. Zia was saying, will not be able to function until you connect with other kuliahs. After all, you talk about integration of knowledge, which is fine, but ours were probably limited to rival knowledge and human sciences. But you need to integrate everything else. Science and arts need to be integrated. Dominant and non-dominant knowledge needs to be integrated. Practical way of doing it, theoretical, all this need to be integrated. And we can only do that if you break down all these silos. If you don't do that, then we will be obsolete in probably less than 10 years' time. Now, what I want at the end of the day, this whole idea of kuliah do not exist anymore. And we need to move that in a very small steps, because there are people who have got nostalgia over this, just like when you want to, to remove this, this is my kuliah and I want to keep it. But that's okay. But you need to also make sure that you move in. And that's why I was Sejahtera academic framework. I think you know this. What do? We say there are 4 things that's important. One is empowerment, one is flexibility, one is innovation, and the last accountability. And it's all given to you. If you want to empower to change it, you're allowed to change it, as long as you make sure that accountability stays. And these now are up to you. As much as what Zia was saying, it's up to you to change. You want to create your own world. I cannot create your world for you. And therefore, you need to be empowered to do this. And that flexibility is yours. Your imagination, put it in paper and give it to us, and we work it. And now, under Sejahtera framework, you can take any course that you want, as far as I can see. You can even introduce courses of your own into the university. I mean, that's the kind of flexibility that we see. And that is Islam, I think. That is Islam. Islam is so open. Islam is everywhere. But we are now trying to define Islam that Islam allows only this, the rest are not allowable. And we got stuck with it. And everything must have an Islamic thing in front. There must be an Islamic car. There must be an Islamic this. When I put SDG, when I first start, they say, what can you call Islamic Sustainable Development? Sustainable development is several Islamic. You don't have to put the word. Our fascination of putting everything Islam. The Christians don't do this. The Buddhists don't do this. The Jews don't do this. Only the Muslims, because they feel that the world is so shrunk that they need to own that. We own this whole world. It's ours. Make use of it. Work it. I think the solution is there. It's a matter of us now moving. Once you start moving with this atlas here, I think we can already move tomorrow. I'm very happy with your kind of statement, and that is what we want to do.
When this university was first formed in the 80s, I used to produce a magazine called Inquiry. There may be some people here who know what Inquiry was about. So I wrote an article called What is an Islamic University? Which was basic critique of International Islamic University. And one of the things I criticized, I said, okay, so every university has a department of religion. Okay, so we have kuliah of revealed knowledge, right? So they will have a department of education. So we'll have a kuliah of education, right? So basically what we were doing, even though we want things to be Islamic, we were actually just copying the standard European model of university, which is in fact what this university is all about, with lots of Islamic labels. Let's face it. Some very good teaching goes on here. Some brilliant people have emerged from here. Some brilliant people teach here. But the overall structure of the university is very much modeled on the Western institutions, right? Instead of department, we call it kuliah, and we feel very happy about it. Largely because we suffer from a psychological problem of inferiority, in a sense, that we only feel confidence when something has Islamic label to it, even though that Islamic label may not make it very different, right? I mean, it may be the same thing, but we want the Islamic label because it's a psychotherapy. We feel better about it, right? In this sense. I think that ghettoizes Islam, and that ghettoizes Muslim. We need to kind of look at the history as a whole. There's a very good book by Marshall Hodgson, which is a brilliant young man, died very young, brilliant scholar of Islam, wrote The Venture of Islam, which I hope everybody here has read. If you haven't read it, 3-volume Venture of Islam, then what the hell are you doing in the university? Go out and read The Venture of Islam. But he also wrote another book called Rethinking History. And he said, Islamic history is nothing Islamic about it, right? There is Islamic history is world history. We shape the world, right? Why are we simply looking at the Islamic world? When you're talking about history of Islam, you're talking about world history, right? In a sense. Or when we should talk about ourselves, we should think of ourselves in global terms. We were a global civilization. Hopefully, we'll become a global civilization again. Right? We are global, right? And we have to think big, not in a small kind of narrow sense. And one of the things about these silos in university is that they are all about power and structure, right? This is my department. I'm going to preserve this territory no matter what, right? And we have to get away from that mentality. The universities, the lecturers, all of these people have to get away from that. Why? Because this is a false notion. Individual departments do not provide you with power anymore. Power comes from interdisciplinary studies, because that's how you solve problems, right? Individual disciplines do not solve problems in a sense. So I think this university, the VC is correct. This university probably would not have any kulliyas in 10, 15 years time. It will have to change. I mean, you can use Islamic term for whatever emerges, if that helps you, makes you feel comfortable, but it wouldn't have these kind of things. This is a kulliyah of revealed knowledge and this is a kulliyah of non-revealed knowledge, right? All knowledge is knowledge in a sense. You have to kind of, have a more integrative and transdisciplinary approach to the whole thing. And so there is a book that IIIT has published, and it's called Rethinking Higher Education. I think you should download and read that, because that has some of these ideas in it. And, it also argues why we need to move from Islamization of knowledge to integration of knowledge. And the problem with Islam, and in fact, I was one of the first critics of Islamization of knowledge right at the beginning. And at the moment, what we can say two things about Islamization of knowledge. One, that when it was first conceived in the 70s, the idea that the disciplines were epistemological bias was new and innovative, and it was correct. And it is correct today as well. Yeah. But the notion that you could Islamize these disciplines by breathing ilahiyat in them was false and doesn't make sense. And that's why Islamization has failed. This whole Islamization of knowledge enterprise has failed to my way of thinking. Think of what is a discipline, because we come back to the university. What is a discipline? How does a discipline emerge? So God didn't say this is physics, this is chemistry, this is sociology, this is anthropology. No. There were some people who needed to manage and control other people. And they said, how do we do that? So they created a discipline called anthropology. The function of anthropology was to maintain and manage non-Western people, describe them as lazy, as in case of Malaya, right? Or as a martial race, as is cases of Sikhs in India, right? Essentially demonize them some way so they could be manipulated, they could be controlled and managed. That's the function of anthropology. How are you going to Islamize that? Right? My colleague Marilyn Davis wrote a whole book saying this is ridiculous. Right? The function of sociology was to control the working classes. Right? And how are you going to Islamize that? A discipline which has kind of biased against the poor built in. Right? John Rawls' great theory of justice, at the end he says, the poor have no place in my theory of justice. And I threw the book away. I said, what the bloody do I need this justice which has no place for the poor in it? And why are we teaching this rubbish again to every student? It's absolutely necessary to read John Rawls, right? We may have to, and this is what I argued in my piece, What is Islamic University? In inquiry, and it's one of the chapters in my book, Islamic Futures, The Shape of Ideas to Come, and you can download the book. We may have to create our own disciplines. because disciplines emerge from a culture, right? And they cater to the needs and requirements and values and virtues of that culture. So we may have to create disciplines ourselves which reflect the kind of concerns you have, and the visions you have about the future, what the society you want to shape, right? And these disciplines may take bits from existing disciplines. They may have totally new ideas, new innovations. You know, they may be integrative, they may be interdisciplinary, they may be totally radical and profoundly different. They may not be, but they will cater for the needs and requirements of the society that we have, that you have, and your desires and your futures. And that's a major challenge. But that's how I see that universities will actually thrive. So it's not necessary to, let's give you one little example and I shut up. In 1975-76, I found myself at King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah. One day I went to the university and there are lots of frogs running about all over the place. Huge number of frogs, you know, jumping away everywhere. So I asked somebody, what the bloody hell is frog? So a truck load of frogs had come and the frogs had escaped from the truck. So I said, but what are the frogs doing here? They said they are for dissection in the biology classes, right? So I went there, I said, why are you dissecting the frogs? He opened the textbook and said, look, textbook says dissect frogs. I said, bloody lizards, cockroaches, all these bullshit here, why can't you dissect them, right? So it didn't occur to them. They were importing frogs to dissect because the textbook told them to do that. This is exactly what happens in this university as well, because I have seen it with my eyes, not in the case of frogs, but in the case of other disciplines, right? And this happens in most universities in the Muslim world, right? Because we haven't thought about what is a discipline. We don't know, you know, how disciplines emerge in a sense, and we need to think about it very seriously, because the post-normal times demand that the complexity we are going to face cannot be tackled, cannot be navigated by existing kind of narrow-minded disciplines and silos that exist in various universities. Yeah. Okay, please do. Yeah.
So I think part of the question, I was getting something about data overload. Come again. So in part of your question, and some of the other questions I think that we've had too, this notion of data overload and how to cope with that and coping with the interdisciplinarity of things. I got a hint that I think you were trying to get at a problem that I think, so I as a millennial, and I think this is going to be an even bigger problem for Gen Z or Gen Z, whichever you say here. And it's the problem of perfection. So we're dealing with the death of expertise, right? So no one can be the perfect biologist. No one can be the perfect anthropologist. No one can be the perfect anything. And I think we need to come to terms with that. And it's stacked against us, right? Social media stacks this against us. We're always trying to be perfect, trying to look perfect, get the most likes, all of that stuff. John Steinbeck wrote a book called East of Eden. And in that, there's a wonderful line that says, now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. And so I think that's a thing that we as a generation and the next generation especially are really going to have to come to terms with. And that's kind of the heart of this multidisciplinary activity. We have to be okay with not being correct, that we might get some things wrong along the way. That's the nature of science. You have to experiment. You have to learn. That's what learning is. You don't learn anything if you don't get anything wrong. So I think that's just another thing I might want to add to enhance the discussion that's been going on so far. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. and Scott. Brother, you would like to ask a question? Yeah.
How about sisters?
After that, I will take sisters. Sister Atira, okay. Turn on your mic.
Assalamualaikum. Oh, it's okay. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Assalamualaikum. I'm Muhammad Ari Julfi, Master's in Marketing final year student from Business Administration Department. So of course, there is no second earth, so we all are concerned about the environment, and there are many ways actually polluting our environment. But my concern is the tourism sector. So I call this is a mid-normal situation. So this mid-normal situation, we saw that we've seen many around the world in several tourism segments, people are rushing for tourism, whether it's marine life or marine tourism or ecotourism. People are roaming. So if the situation is like now, and people are bored in pandemic, in lockdown, so I think after post-normal situation, the situation will be more worse right now. So they are polluting our environment, tourists. Two of my articles are published in Scopus Q2, and the study, we found that in the coastal life and coastal marine life, more vulnerable because of tourism, unplanned tourism. So this is the big concern. My question is how we can aware our students, children from grade 1 to master level about tourism, about environmental concern. So environmental concern is something like a pen and paper topic nowadays. And I believe that if a child or a student from grade 1 to post-graduation or graduation level, they are used to the topic of environmental concern, they might be aware enough in their mature life or in their adult life. So this can be beneficial for next generation. And so this is my concern, that how we can aware our students institutionally from grade 1 to higher education level, and how we can improve institutional tourism, which is education tourism. Thank you.
Yes, this is true. I think tourism is pretty destructive in many places, and there's some cities, I know at least two, for example, Barcelona, where tourists are hated, right? But Barcelona cannot survive without tourists. Place like Langkawi that I spent 1 week on cannot survive without tourists, in a sense. So it's a catch-20, it's the contradiction, right? We need to do something about it. So maybe we need to create a whole new discipline of tourist studies, which looks at the bad side of tourism and find solutions to negating those, and enhances the good side of tourism. Don't forget that if you translate tourism, maybe you can't do that. Don't forget that travel is a Islamic institution. Hajj, the very function of Hajj is that you travel. You leave your home and go to somewhere else, right? And you meet different people and cultures and so on and so forth. And there's, of course, a great tradition of travel for discovery in Islamic history. And people, Al-Ghazali is also written a book
part of religious tourism, I guess.
Sorry?
Hajj and other pilgrim traveling is part of religious tourism or something like this. Religious, new term of tourism.
They may. Not all travel is religious. Ibn Battuta, for example, did not travel for religious purposes. Many places travel to marry, from what I can see. Right, in many places he went to travel to have adventure and so on and so forth. Travel is important. And what we need to do is translate tourism into travel. You see, tourism is fast and destructive. Travel is slow and gentle and interactive. And the tourist comes in for 1 week, looks around, takes photograph, right? Even I've seen like people who go to Umrah, they just go there to take photograph and come back, right? Which is very, very common nowadays. Traveler I've written, I've got partly I've worked as a travel writer, and some of my books are travel books. I've never took a camera with me. Always took a notebook, right? And travel is something completely different. You see, travel is engagement with the society you're in. It's learning about other cultures, learning to appreciate different perspectives. So what we may need to do is to create a new discipline that transforms tourism into travel, right? And then you can get the benefits of both worlds, right? You can allow people to travel, and then they can bring the economic benefit to the cities that need, but you get away from this kind of, mad tourists coming in, taking 3 photographs, throwing the rubbish around and going, For example, in Florence, the ship would come in, drop the tourists there and go. And in fact, all those cruise ships had destroyed the city. Now they banned the cruise ships from there. So we don't want them to go 20 miles from our city. So I appreciate what you're saying about how tourists are having a destructive effect on ecology and so on and so forth. But it's a there's a lot of contradictions there, and I think we need to study and see how we can transfer it to something more positive, something slow and productive.
Can I share my experience on this one? We went to Bhutan, and we have to ask for a visa, and the visa is about $200 US a day, kind of a visa. Yes, a day. I thought we gone to a wrong place.
Sir, is it Bhutan?
Huh?
Bhutan.
Bhutan, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just beside Nepal.
I've been there before.
And what I found out, basically, your 200 US a day covers your hotel, your food, your transportation, your visit to anything in Bhutan. They control it because they want to make sure that you don't destroy the country.
Yeah, and only smoke-free country in the world.
Yes.
Bhutan is not allowed to smoke.
Sustainable. Your transportation is sustainable. Your food is the best food that they can offer. And you can visit any of their cultural center free of charge. That's tourism to them. I think there's a very progressive way of looking at it, rather than, appear, and then you see it anywhere, the worst thing, the worst tourism, you pay so much, but you destroy the whole country. I think that's the kind of understanding that I think we should have. We should redefine that, and that's how I think we should. And this is the thinking that we need. But we are part of the problems at the same time. You go to these places called London and you do whatever you want, and then you come back with just photography with a Trafalgar Square, and that's it. And that's London for you. You have not gone even to the museum. You're not even gone to the art center, whatever it is. You're more for shopping. And you will be very happy to see that I love London. That's it. That's tourism for you. I think this is not what I think tourism is all about from my point of view.
Yeah, but you end up buying the things in London for twice the price that you can get them in Kuala Lumpur in the first place. And then you bring them all the back, in your luggage.
Yeah.
So
it's made in Bangladesh.
And yeah, made in Bangladesh anyway. Yeah.
Yes, sister, please.
Assalamualaikum, Prof. Zia. My name is Nur Atira from Ibrahim Kuliah of Law. So we are talking about student movement in post-normal times. So you mentioned that in post-normal time, things and tools are changing. So while students adapt to these new tools to make changes, how about other communities that don't want to adapt to the new tools and changes? For example, if student movement want to champion our voices, we can't stand alone. We need university authorities. We need people in higher ups. So, for example, in post-normal times, the modes of communication is very different, I would say. The elders and the young, we use different modes of communication. Maybe we don't really have a demonstration and rally for every issue, but we do speak up about our right in social media and all. So these are the new tools that are used by the youngsters right now. So how about the other community that don't want to adapt to these new tools? So how student movement want to advocate to these other communities? That's my question. Thank you.
Well, you don't want to force people to change.
Yeah.
But I think in certain cases, people will be forced to change by circumstances around them. You see what I mean? Right. So even people like me now kind of use the iPhone and all that, even despite the fact, I was very reluctant to do that. For many years, I traveled around with a manual typewriter and I learned to type on a manual typewriter. So when I bought eventually gave in and bought an electric typewriter, I typed on it as though I was typing on a manual typewriter. So the keys will get jammed and the thing will break down very quickly, right? So I had to learn that this is a different machine. I have to do gently, and I still find it very difficult to type gently. I still type very fast, 100 words a minute, but I hit the keyboard very hard. You adjust to change, right? So those who don't want to change would adjust to change. But there are some who don't want to change for a very good reason, because that's their lifestyle, right? So there's some tribes, say in the Amazon, that's how they live. It is their right and it is our duty to allow them to live the way they want to live. And in some cases, their life is much more sustainable than our lifestyles, right? And we need to appreciate. And we need to also appreciate that they have their own system of knowledge, right? Which could be just as sophisticated as ours. Sometimes we call it tacit knowledge as opposed to objective knowledge because it's culturally bound, right? So it's not, we don't want, the problem with kind of post-normal change we are seeing is like a tsunami. It's kind of decimating everything. And there are certain things we just do not want to change. Things change, yes, that's fine. We want to change things as well, fine, yeah. But there are also certain things that we do not want to change. These are the things that we cherish because of our culture, because of our religion, or because of a lifestyle, and we have to try and maintain that, or tradition. We have to try and maintain that they remain the same. I hope I answered your question. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think we can take last question. Okay, two. We have two. Okay, one more from you.
One from this side.
I think brother first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Odrsdce from the Kuliah of Islamic Banking and Finance. Thank you very much, Prof, for the enlightening lectures. I would like to ask, like, as student leaders and aspiring entrepreneurs among us, and I would like to know how can we embrace and navigate through these super dynamic or changes of the realities of the outside world in terms of AI taking human jobs, which I found so fascinating and at the same time, petrifying.
Yeah.
And also, how can we enhance green energy promotion? And also, as future investors, how can we navigate through future economic crisis? So I would like, an insight on this, Prof. Thank you.
When I said ask difficult questions, I didn't mean you should ask a question that requires me to write a book. How do we navigate future economic crisis? I'm afraid we'll have to leave out because it's a very big question and it does require Professor Aslam to be here, and he's not here. AI, yes, it's very interesting. Again, a development full of contradiction, right? First of all, in some cases it can be a good thing, but in some cases it could be a very frightening and very bad thing. Good things, yes, it can detect cancer. We can use it to do various medical things, etc., etc. Bad things, well, several studies have come out to say AI is racially biased. It's gender biased. It's racially biased, right? When I did my old information science, they used to say garbage in, garbage out, right? Now, of course, you put, racist rhetoric in and racist rhetoric comes out. It depends who writes the code, in that sense. This morning, I read in Financial Times, the main story, the cover on the front page of Financial Times, that DeepMind software can write its own code now. So you have an AI that can write its own computer code. Yeah, where will that lead us? We know that social media and AI have been disastrous for Muslim societies. There would have been no genocide of Rohingya Muslims without social media. There'd be no absolute culture genocides of the Uyghur Muslims without AI. How the Chinese use the AI to profile them and to target them. Yeah. So these are pretty horrendous tools, which could have very serious consequences for us. So I think the first thing to do is that we need to come to, it's a genie out of the box, so we can't put it back again, right? And we have to produce our own artificial intelligence. In a sense, we can't rely on others. We have to do our own coding, because, the bias comes from the guys who write the code, in that sense. And lots of AI, of course, is based on big data, and lots of big data is based on false information and, fake news and deep fake and all the other stuff, and which gets integrated into the whole system. And lots of that big data that is, false is very Islamophobic as well, right? In a sense. So we need to think about these issues very, very carefully, in my opinion, and just not embrace. And this actually goes, it's not just about AI, it's about all technology. Every time something shiny comes in your lap, remember that it has a downside. There are second and third order consequences which have not been explored, which could be quite serious for you. So you need to explore them, and not, we need to look at every technology from various perspectives and not just accept, all the great things it's supposed to do, in that sense. The green energy, green energy stuff is very well established, solar energy and wind power and etc., etc. But the question is, why are the Muslim countries not embracing it? A country like Pakistan, where I've seen kind of solar energy will really thrive, right? But nobody's paying any attention, right? There's hardly any alternative energy sources in Malaysia. I don't know. I haven't seen any. I haven't heard about any. Right. So the question is not that green energy is not there out there, but the question is, why are we not adapting it? Right. So there may be good economic reasons. There may be good corruption reasons, but I suspect that most of them are economic and corruption reasons. That they So it's then upon you to go out and promote green energy. And when you graduate, you start your own, solar power factory and promote the thing. We have to do it. Clearly, the governments are not doing it. We have to do it. And I hope that a lot of people from economic department, marketing department here, business studies, you go out and create your own little, green energy niches. The last question, as I said, is too big to explore. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof. Do we have any questions from this side? Ada? Sana tak ada. Okay. I think we can take the last question from this side.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Iqbal Hadi. I'm from the student of Muslim and comparative religion. Okay, post-normal times. I suggest that this is time where almost everything is abnormal, from the macro scale to little minor scale, like economic inequality, LGBT, climate change, Islamophobia, poverty, and many more. This is very scary, especially towards the youth generation. It's like the world moved toward its own destruction. So I would like to quote a hadith, meaning Anas bin Malik reported that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, if the final hour comes while you have a shoot of a plant in your hands, and it is possible to plant it before the hour comes, you should plant it. These are this kind of giving us a hope. So my question is, how we as student organization and youth generation instill hope in ourselves in facing these post-normal times. Thank you.
I think you have answered your own question by quoting the hadith, right? What does the hadith?
I want to, like, from your point of view, like,
yeah. Listen, the thing is, why are we Muslims, right? And I think by definition we are Muslims because we trust in God's mercy and compassion, right? That means we can never be hopeless. We can never despair. The despair is forbidden in Islam. I mean, suicide is one of the worst, crimes you can commit, right? So Muslim, by definition, we have to be hopeful, right? And if we are hopeful, then we also need some inspiration to go out, translate that hope into something that really is creative and produces, changes in the world, the kind of changes that we need. And I think, in our own workshops, we use that hadith, but we also use another hadith, the very famous hadith. The Prophet says, trust in God, but tie your camel. So we are hopeful, we trust in God, but what we fail to do systematically is to tie our camel. And what tying your camel means is to go out and change the world. That's what it means, right? To change the world according to your own hopes and aspirations, your own visions, your own values, your own virtues, and your own concerns, your own requirements, and your own needs. That's what we need to do. So basically, I would like to invite you to do just that, starting from now.
Do that before you finish. I just want to remind that we are in university. University is about change. University is not about change, and I think we are in the wrong place. All of us come into university, we know nothing. But when we get out of university, we know something. Now that needs to be the platform for you to make more changes. And I think change is very, very important. I like the last statement. Yeah, we are here for change. We have come, spend 2 hours with Prof. Ziauddin. Not many people can have this time. But make sure that tomorrow, what change are you going to bring tomorrow? That's the first question here. What change you're going to bring the next day? Every day is about change. It could be a small change, but change nevertheless, and becomes out of your habit, then I think change will be part of your culture. And I think that's the only hope that the university have got. The university is moving, like I say, 40 years. Hence, what change are we looking at? We have made our history 40 years ago, but what about 40 years ahead of us? And it all depends on you, because people like me and Zodi, we probably will not be here for a longer time. And then it depends on you. If you don't make it, then I think the next generation will suffer even more. Yeah. So thank you very much. I really appreciate and listening from a person like this. Maybe the rector, I've been saying this many a time, deputy rector, you get tired of it. It is another gentleman, a very, we call well-known intellectual. Read his books and you'll find that you are actually in a good company. So I hope we can make this change, inshallah. It's incumbent upon us. There's no way out, especially for here when we talk about Rahmatan lil Alamin. We're going to be asked about it, and I hope we can make good answers for this. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri and Prof. Ziauddin Sardar. I think this session has been a wake-up call for all of us. I think most of us are a student leader, and even if we are a normal student, this has been a wake-up call for us to be the agent of change. No matter what is our capacity in the society, is that we can make a change even with our individual capacity, inshallah. Now, before we end the session, we would like to invite Honorable Tan Sri Rector to confer a token of appreciation from RIUM to Professor Ziauddin. Thank you very much to our respected speaker, Professor Ziauddin Sardar, Honorable Tan Sri Rector, and our Deputy Rector, Associate Professor Dr. Zulkifli Hassan, and all of our guests. Stay tuned for other Odrsdce Intellectual Discourse series. Stay safe, and wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We adjourn our event with Tasbih Kafarah and Surah Al-Asr.